Okay, we're live. I just want to say first and foremost, I'm really, really, really appreciative today to have such a fine guest such as Bruce Pardy on. He's been someone that I've been watching and following for quite some time now. And him, in addition to like Jordan Peterson, David Haskell, some of these gentlemen, some very poignant gentlemen in academia who have actually shown that they have the courage of their conviction, that are willing to be that one in a million apparently in our country that's willing to at least give Canadians something to actually pique their interest and talk about and discuss. That's not just a copy and paste a narrative basically that's jammed down our throat for most of the people who come from academia. So I, for one, am genuinely generally appreciative and a big time admirer of Bruce for his willingness to not just to come on my show and to talk about this stuff, but to stand up, because I know how difficult it can be. I know what kind of pushback, trust me, that you're going to get from daring to step outside the current paradigm. But Bruce is definitely one of those gentlemen that's willing to do so, and I'm very appreciative of that. So thanks, Bruce. And if you even just want to take a minute to tell some of the people in my audience what even got you to this point, because obviously you would have been a gentleman that was, pretty much, I would imagine you were fairly comfortable and living quite well and have a good position and doing quite well and stuff. But something obviously piqued you or caused you to be able to get into this space where you find yourself, where you and I are now having a conversation. So maybe you just want to give a little background as to what got you to the place where you're at now today.
Sure. Bennett, thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure and an honor. So people ask me this sometimes and ask whether or not, there was a moment where I came to the light, if you like. And really, I've always more or less been oriented philosophically and politically this way. It's just that for many years, I was, doing law professor work, and actually I was in, as we all are, sort of in specialty fields like environmental law and torts and so on, and sort of plugging away at what I thought was a proper way to conceptualize the rule of law. And over time, of course, you find that you're talking to a brick wall in the sense that a whole lot of other people in the field really don't care about that and are on a completely different page.
Yeah.
And so eventually, I still do academic work, but more and more I thought that it was more productive to talk outside the academy, to people who actually were open to ideas, new ideas, open ideas, libertarian ideas. And it's been a very rich, rewarding, positive experience. I've really enjoyed it. So here I am.
Right on. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's kind of the journey I've been on too. And you do get, when you're talking about libertarians or independent thinkers or people that are philosophically minded, there can be some push and pull, and there can be some disagreements, because these are people who have, a lot of independence and some critical skills. So you get a lot of, but what I found, I'm sure you have as well, is by doing that, other than sitting, like you say, in the kind of setting you're in, is that has greatly expanded my mindset in so many areas, even things in terms of how I understand religion or all these things, or what even government is. What is government? Like all these things, by having these conversations with people who were, typically like along your lines. I might not have been, the kind of person that would have talked to these kind of people before, but to expand my knowledge in such a way, to me, has just been the most rewarding experience that I could possibly think of. And it's actually translated even in my own personal life to making me, I think I'm even a much better person now today as a consequence.
Right. And also the bottom line is also it's fun. It's really good fun. Talk to people who are willing to talk and think and argue about things in good faith. It's a great way to live.
It is. Actually, it's funny you say that, because that kind of perfectly aligns with I've been racing since I was a teenager, drag racing predominantly. But the beautiful thing about competitive sports is it is that, like, it's very competitive, like you say, but then there's a lot of camaraderie that comes with it, and the fact that it is fun. It's very exciting, and what we're doing is we're engaging in the battle of ideas, but it's just words. It's just people talking. So it's a beautiful thing where, yes, the rules of the game is, all we have to do is we're just talking. We're not trying to use force on each other. We're just having a conversation, and it can be very engaging, very enlightening. And like you say, it can be actually quite entertaining too, depending on the person's particular charisma or personality. But anyways, enough with that there, Bruce. Let's just get right down to the nitty gritty of it, because that's what the folks that are going to be watching this live stream are going to be predominantly looking for is let's get to discussing like the ideas, the big things. So anyways, basically, actually, let me bring this at a full screen because it was you put a lot of stuff out on X, but it was this one in particular that I kind of reached out and said that I wanted to talk to you about. Let me just make sure that is up on the screen. Yeah, it is. Okay. Yeah, I don't have anyone in the background. I know a lot of people got other people to do all the producing in the background, but yeah, I am a one-man band, a one-man show here. So anyways, so there was this post that you had put. Let me just click on it there now. Parts of the classical liberalism canon are wobbly, in my opinion. They are not strong foundations for political liberty, natural rights, rationality, objective truth. Anyway, so this is what we're going to be dealing with. But because we are kind of talking about natural rights and all that stuff, so the first one is natural rights. Beings have natural rights. The state cannot grant liberty. We already have it. Constitution cannot create rights. We already possess them. Rights are not found in documents. And that's 100%. I agree 100% along that lines. And that's actually enshrined and very well known in the American Constitution. But in our document, things are a little bit different. So my thing when I talk about is when you first start reading it, so it says, it does suggest at the very beginning of our Canadian Charter of Rights, it says that it's based on the rule of law, but it's all God is included in there, right? So there's God and the rule of law. And because of the history of our country and coming from that Christian ethic and the foundation, the kind of people who founded this country, the whole point of God is to take it, right? You know, it depends on how people want to believe things, but it's to take it out of the hands of human and basically suggest that you just have rights because you're just born. There's no such thing as the natural state as you're supposed to be a slave or subject or a serf to any kind of ruling class. So the presumption for people who understand, you know, classical liberalism, at least to how it used to be presented, is your rights are inherent and they're fundamental. It's just a matter of just being born. So these are your rights. And because of that recognition of the supremacy of God, then no human beings could override those kind of rights. So, you know, whether you want to believe in the man in the sky or not, the whole point is the point of having God and the rule of law and the term God is it's above humans. Humans don't, because we are fallible and because it's acknowledged through Christianity that we are sinners. So there can't be human beings that are determining what is right and wrong. Or so basically I use another analogy as math. We use the term math, but what does really math mean? You can't point to math, but what it says is math, the formulation of math is what is the supreme authority in how you deal with calculations, right? There's no human being that you ask like how to do math. Is the formula. Mathematics is the formula, and then you just extrapolate your knowledge from that. So if we recognize, and even our founding document suggests that rule of law is supposed to be based and built upon God as being the supreme being and having these kind of rights, then my first question to you is, and I'll just mention too a little quick background. One of the things that got me into this, Bruce, was I was charged on my ATV. I ride sport ATVs. I live in rural New Brunswick. I was charged with impaired driving on my ATV, and I'd never been in trouble with the law in my life, and I didn't realize how this was going to go about, but I was a long haul truck driver at the time, and come to find out these mandatory minimums apparently that exist. They now have these carte blanche laws that no matter what the circumstance or anything, basically for someone like myself, they can destroy your entire livelihood, your career, and basically almost throw your life down the toilet with these arbitrary, because as far as mandatory minimums are concerned, you know, you're taking the importance of each case being judged based on, you know, the merits and the facts of each case. Now you're just saying to a judge, like, you basically don't have independent discretion to determine, because, you know, I would imagine under that scenario, a judge would have said, listen, I'm not going to, you know, destroy your whole life because of something where there was no victim involved or anything like that. You know, we might have to do some punishment in some way so to make sure we deter you from, you know, doing these kinds of things. But that was one of the first inklings where I realized, well, wait a minute, if our rule of law, it doesn't seem to be based on the ethics or the morality that I understood that was taught to me, you know, growing up in a religious family, which is the supremacy of God. So my first question to you is, when did Canadian law move away from the Christian principles and ethics and now have turned to being so arbitrary? And you have all these people, these judges that should be highly educated and properly informed in the modern world, who are going along with this stuff. When did this change? Are you familiar or aware of that as someone that comes from the legal field? When did this change? Are you aware of that? Or
well, there's no moment
okay,
when there's a sudden change.
Okay.
And it is true that our law has become increasingly arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
But the law is always somewhat arbitrary for this reason.
Okay.
No matter how well you think you nail down what the rule is, there are always going to be some ambiguities. That's just the nature of language.
Right.
And so you put these people, judges, in the position of interpreting what the words mean. And sometimes they do it in a way that we like, and sometimes they don't.
Right.
A judge that I very much respect the other day was giving a talk, and he said, the rule of law depends upon the moral behavior of judges. Right. And, I get his point. I think it's probably right. But there's a problem there, because if your system of law is dependent upon a particular kind of behavior of the people who are powerful within it, then that system is susceptible in all kinds of ways to bad things. And to boot, and this gets to the central theme, I think, of our conversation today,
right,
which is who can dictate what is moral, right? People of all kinds of political persuasions claim that they know what is moral.
Right.
We do that too. The classical liberals, the libertarians, we say this all the time. But my overarching point, especially with respect to that tweet, is this: that tweet, these three things, which I just picked out of the libertarian or classical liberal canon, right? The natural rights, rationality, objective truth. I mean, these are philosophical premises.
Yeah.
And sure, I mean, I embrace those premises too. But the point is this: if you think you are engaged in a contest of ideas, arguing premises gets you nowhere.
Right.
Because you're not arguing the premises. All you're doing is asserting them. Right? So if you're talking to, someone who is more conservative, or if you're talking to somebody who's progressive, and you assert that people have natural rights, and here's what they are, and you assert that as a premise, it's like they don't care about that, and you haven't proved the premise. All you've done is state it. So let's take another example. Let's say there's a discussion going on between a Christian and an atheist.
Okay.
And they're arguing about what's real and true and good. And the Christian goes to the Bible and cites the atheist, a passage in the Bible. Well, the atheist should properly respond, look, your premise is that God is real and the Bible is true. But citing the Bible doesn't make that true. No. It means nothing to me because I don't share your premise.
Right.
In order to have an effect upon me, you have to prove, or at least argue, that those two things are in fact correct. You can't start there. You have to finish there. Right? And so these three premises that we have are all very well. And at a different time, they would have been helpful and were helpful in getting out from under the thumb of people who were pushing us around. So if you think of the king or religious authorities, right? There were all kinds of people in authority who acted as intermediaries between people and the truth. Right? We will tell you what God wants. And these ideas basically said, no, we can do this for ourselves. We can see the world as it is. We can be rational ourselves. We can make observations, and we have the right to do that on our own. Okay. But those are premises, and today those premises are shared by other people who have very different philosophical inclinations than we do. So, for example, you will hear this claim from common good conservatives, as I like to call them, that there is objective truth. And the only difference between the objective truths that we're all claiming is that the content is different. Right? So How are you going to establish to persuade the other guy that your version of objective truth is true and theirs is wrong? Well, if you start with a premise, all you're doing is shouting at each other and saying, is so, is not, is so, is not, that's pointless, right?
Right.
So just to state these three things: number one, that humans have natural rights; number two, that humans are rational; and number three, that there is objective truth. Fine, but so what? I mean, who cares? If you're trying to win an argument, those three things don't really win you the argument. And in fact, in some ways, because of the situation that we are in today, those three things can backfire. Let's just talk again about natural rights. You referred to the Constitution,
right?
The rule of law and God and so on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for my money, people are making an error when they take this premise about what natural rights we all have as by virtue of being human, and they equate that philosophical idea with what the law contains or how the law is supposed to work.
Right.
So people will assert that they have the natural rights to these following freedoms. We all know the list. I have freedom of speech. I have freedom of religion. I have freedom of conscience. And so on and so forth.
Mobility. Yeah.
Right. Fine. But if you go into a courtroom, that means nothing. Nothing. You walk into a courtroom and you say, "Well, Your Honor, I have natural rights to freedom of speech." Judge's going to look at you like, "Well, that's all very well, but what does the law say? And what does the charter say? And what do the cases on the charter say?" And so when the law requires you to file an income tax return reporting on what you did and what you earned this year, which is compelled speech, the judge is not going to accept your argument that you have natural rights and don't have to do that. That's just not going to happen. So we are speaking of a purely philosophical idea, and I've got no problem with the idea. I mean, I like the idea, but it doesn't get you anywhere.
Right.
It doesn't help. It doesn't help to push back the interference from the state. It doesn't help to persuade a judge. It's not the way the system works.
No, definitely
right.
not.
And it doesn't persuade those people who do not agree with libertarian ideas to adopt them. Right. So let's try the next one.
Well, actually, Bruce,
okay, go ahead.
Well, I just just in case this might help you to further explain your thing. So the reason why I brought up my case, and I'll kind of deal with that as well, because that probably will help you springboard into what you're going to say next. So how I should have pointed the question is, so because the judge, now to me, what I understood, and I kind of have a decent working knowledge of law and jurisprudence and stuff. I'm not a lawyer by any stretch, but going all the way back from Magna Carta and all these 800 years later, what I come to learn and understand that in the Anglosphere, at least, that the understanding for anything to be considered a crime, like to be criminal in nature, a criminal infraction, is there had to be a victim. So here's the part where I guess when I was asking the question, like, when did our legal system go away from? Because, and this kind of ties into the objective truth, and then just using logic and our natural rights and all this stuff without using that particular terminology. But for a judge that's been trained in what should be, like I say, the history of English and British common law, because that is part. I mean, we are basically part of the British monarchy still to this day. So how are judges, like, how are they coming out of this with this? Like when they introduced the mandatory minimums, whether it's for the gun laws, although I think some of them have been overturned, but all these mandatory minimums, once again, and especially, like I say, in my case and countless other cases that, especially when you're talking about impaired, once again, not advocating for doing anything like that, but I'm just saying, when there is no victim, how did the legal system get around or circumvent the understanding that for it to be considered an actual crime, there had to be a victim? So that, I don't know if that's help you better explain things.
That as much as I would like that idea to apply, that is not the idea. We have all kinds of crimes in the books and have had crimes in the books that have no victim. There are all kinds of things you're not allowed to do. So, for example, you're not allowed to take narcotic drugs. There's no actual victim there except for society more generally, which people would claim, but that's a victimless crime. And there are lots of others, and have been lots of others in the past, like things you are not allowed to do even with other consenting adults. Right? Morality crimes, we sometimes call them. These are crimes about things you're not allowed to do. Why? Because society regards them as immoral. Right? Now, you and I would regard those things as out of bounds because it affects nobody else but yourself.
Right.
But that hasn't been the state of the law for a long time. So the fact, as long as there is a crime passed in the criminal code and passed in the proper way, proper procedural way, and if it does not, according to the courts, infringe a right in the Constitution, then whatever it says, and that's the law. So there are a lot of people are carrying around a lot of assumptions about how the law works, and they're not always quite right. Part of our challenge right now is to have as many people as possible understand how the thing actually works, and not to cling to their presumptions about the fact that it's being done wrong. If I can put it this way, one of our biggest problems is not that the system, that is the legislatures and the bureaucrats and the courts, it's not that any of those people are behaving illegally. That is not the problem. The problem is they are behaving legally. They are behaving in a way which is consistent with the way the system is now built and now run. Right. And that's a much more serious problem than the reverse. If this was just a case of somebody not obeying the law, well, we could just go and fix that, right? Because the law itself would try to fix that. That's not the case. The case, the situation is that we have a legal system now that works in a certain way that a lot of us do not approve of, and that's a much harder thing to fix.
Yeah. Well, that actually, so that's perfect, Bruce, and that was actually, thanks for clarifying that. But this gets to the point, kind of the problem of the whole issue, or the heart of the issue is. So once again, now I, being privy to the knowledge and not just a lot of the books I've read, but a lot of people I've had conversations with, so I kind of had a more firm grasp and understanding of what individual liberty actually entails and what it properly means than most. But what I've seen, and I'm kind of grateful for this, even though it caused a lot of Canadians a lot of harm, but the invocation, so the notwithstanding clause, Canadians, some of them get a little up in arms and outraged at that, but it was the invocation of the Emergency Act under the Trudeau regime that has really piqued the curiosity. And finally, and as a libertarian living in this country my whole life, I'm like, finally people are starting to wake up. I'm like, wait a minute, do we actually have rights? Because that's something that I've been singing about this stuff and chirping off about this forever. Is I mean, sure, it sounds great when you read. It's like, oh, you got this right. But the minute there's a preamble or there's any section contained within the document that says that, oh, but you have all these rights, but by the way, I can take them away at any time as long as I deem it justifiable, or another actor within the state deems it justifiable. Then once again, it's not just arbitrary, but to me, it's like, it doesn't seem like it's a whole lot of an advancement from, getting out from underneath like monarchs or dictators of the past. It seems weird because it just seems completely arbitrary to suggest that people have rights, but then you have somehow written a clause in there, and the whole legal structure acknowledges this as something that's legitimate, right? That we're going to say you have all these rights, but we're going to pretend, or I guess they actually believe it, but somehow we can just invoke this thing and boom, your rights go away, instantaneously. Like that's how, like, to me, okay, go. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Let's just back up a step though.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. So let's just think for a moment about what a right is.
Right.
And I'm talking about legal terms. Legal. I'm not mean philosophically. I mean, how does a right work legally?
Right. Okay.
So let's say you have a property right. Let's say you own property, and the right that you have by virtue of your ownership of the property is the right to exclude other people.
Right.
Okay. So the effect of that right means that you now have the power to restrict the liberties of other people. That's what a right is.
Well,
it's limiting their ability to interfere with you.
but to interfere, yeah.
But that's what a property right means, right?
Yeah.
So, but let's go back another step just for a moment.
Okay.
So the anarchists would say that only anarchy is a situation of true liberty because there are no restrictions. And the difference between the anarchists and the libertarians is that the libertarians accept that we need a state to protect each of us from the interference of one another. Right? The anarchists might say, well, yeah, but now you're restricting people's liberty. You're restricting the liberty of some people to beat up other people. And literally, they're correct. I mean, we are all free from coercion, if we are, because we have a state and a police force that prevents us from being mugged on the street. But that is restricting the liberty of those other people to mug us. Right? So let's just define what a legal right is. A legal right is the ability to restrict liberties of other people with the help of the state. So if you have a piece of property and somebody trespasses on the property and won't go away, then you can take your complaint to a court and say, I own the property, I possess the property, here's my title, this person won't leave. Will you please help me get rid of them? And the court will say yes, and here's an order, you must leave the property. But note that you're relying upon the help of the court and the police to further your aims. So all legal rights depend upon the use of the state to enforce them. And that means that our legal rights are not really ours in the sense that we own them independently. We are reliant upon the mechanisms of the state to realize them. And that brings me to what I regard as, what I've been describing as our constitutional mistake. Right? So if you go back in history and to a time, and this was what happened for a long time. What the original problem in England, not the original one, but the one that we're all familiar with, was the king. Like kings were hereditary, and they had absolute power. And then over a very long period of time, with great difficulty, we managed to take power away from the king and give it to legislatures.
Right.
But that was better, right? Because legislatures are elected and kings were hereditary, and so that's better, right? Power to the people. But legislatures, it turns out, can be tyrants too. And so the Americans come along. Obviously, there's the English Civil Rights Act first, but then the Americans come along and constitutionalize rights. They pass a Bill of Rights. Okay?
Right.
But in order to have a Bill of Rights, what you have to do is take power away from the legislature and give it to the courts. So here's the pattern. We took power from the king and gave it to legislatures. We took power from legislatures and gave it to courts. And now in the present era, or more modern era, both courts and legislatures have given power back to the king, but the king himself's not there anymore. Now it's the minister of state. Okay. But my point is this: all we have ever done is move power around. Yeah. From king to legislature to courts to administrative state. So when you have a right, or what appears to be a legal right, it's not that you have the right. It's not that the court has the power to interpret what those words mean and then to give you a remedy if they see fit. Okay, you are always dependent upon a court. If you have a legal right, you are always dependent upon a court to see things your way. And if they don't, then the right means nothing. There's an old saying that goes, "There's no right without a remedy." Meaning, if you have a right, then you'll get a remedy. And if you do not get a remedy, then you don't got a right. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. And you can claim all you like that you have natural rights. But if you go into court and they turn you down, then legally you ain't got nothing.
Yeah. Right. Only thing though, Bruce, what I will point out, a little bit of pushback on that is, so my understanding of this from listening to, like I say, people that come at things from that philosophically minded and physics and epistemology and ethics, most importantly, is and the universality of these ethics. My understanding of our legal system, or at least how it used to be, whether this is just stories that I've been told and maybe it never was a reality, but so theft, like the things that we all accept, so don't hit, don't steal, all those things. The reason why that those are applicable, and we've mostly, I suppose, or the people historically accepted them as being proper in terms of laws, is because they're universally applicable with no contradiction. So don't steal. We can all not take things from other people. We can all do that. No, but we can all do that.
No,
we can all not steal from each other. We all have it within us to not steal.
But the word I'm tripping up on is universal.
Okay, what's the problem with that?
My problem is this: this goes to the point that everybody. I've not met very many people who are not inclined to do this. They think that they understand things that are universal. That is, everybody agrees about this.
Right.
I don't know anything about which everybody agrees. If you think of the most outrageous proposition.
No. I should have clarified. Sorry, Bruce. So it's not that everyone will agree with it, but like I say, it's one thing that you can implement universally and nobody becomes a victim. Like so if we all agree, I'm not saying that everybody will, but I'm saying the reason why a right can be considered to be a universal is because we can all, whether we agree to or not, I obviously accept that some thieves are definitely not going to agree with this, but I'm just saying.
Right, exactly.
But under the scenario, it's that right. The reason why it can be acknowledged as a fundamental right and be considered universal is because we can all agree to not steal from each other, and that can be applicable. Whereas on the other side, if we said some people can steal, right, then you have now a contradiction in the terms. Or if we say it's okay for everyone to steal from each other, well, then the term stealing doesn't even mean anything anymore. So what I'm saying is our rights.
Yeah. No, because Oliver Wendell Holmes famously said, "The life of the law is not logic; it is experience."
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm totally on your page.
No, I know. I like that.
But what you're expressing is an expectation that the law will be coherent. It will be consistent. It will be consistent. It will be neutral. It will be disinterested. It will not be arbitrary.
Right.
And I share those values for the law as much as you do.
Right.
But those are also preferences. Those are values, and not everybody
value for sure.
believes
Value,
in those values, right?
Yeah.
There are lots of people who do not believe that the law should work in that way. A lot of people who are working within the system believe.
I don't believe, but you know what, Bruce? I don't believe that. I don't believe there's one person that says, I want you to steal from me. Because if someone actually wanted me to steal from them, then I wouldn't even have to steal from them. They would just give their stuff away. So, like, right.
Well, but for example, if you look at during the riots a couple of years ago in the U.S., people, breaking into stores to steal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There would have been people within the system who believed that those people should not be prosecuted. And if you believe that, then you believe that the law should not be applied consistently. I mean, if you encounter the whole idea of having an alleged perpetrator,
mm-hmm.
someone who could be charged with an offense,
right,
or could be convicted of an offense, or could be sentenced for an offense, those people inside the system who think, well, the decision about whether to charge them, prosecute them, convict them, and sentence them should depend on who they are and what their circumstances are and what their background is and what their group affiliations are. If you believe that, then you do not believe the law should be coherent.
Right.
You do not believe in blind justice. You believe in social justice instead. This is part of the reason why we have a social justice problem. There are people inside the system, lawyers, judges, who believe that different rules and standards should apply to different groups of people. And when people like me complain that the system is not coherent and not neutral,
no,
they don't care about that. That is not the point for them.
Right. But once again, that to me, I liken that. So I like to use the example of math once again, because it is the terminology, at least it does place like math. Like I say, there's nothing tangible. You can't touch math, right? So it's
Sure.
an abstract concept, really.
Yeah.
But once again, but I'm going to kind of correlate the whole thing with laws in terms of a universal understanding in terms of ethics to back
Yeah.
up our laws with the same thing with mathematics. So yes, someone might say that, you know, you can't punish this person because of their skin color or whatever. But once again, math, once I understand the formula, then I don't have to keep looking to other people to tell me how math works. Now I can just use that formulation. And if somebody comes up to me and says 2 + 2 is 5, well, as long as there's enough of us that understand that, like how math works, understand that formula, the guy that says 2 + 2 is 5, rightfully everyone should look at that person like they're a complete idiot, which they are for trying to even present that case. That's where I'm coming at. It's like, how do you get to the point where, yes, just because someone is saying that no one should be criminally punished because of their skin color or what's between their legs, right? That's like, then let's just laugh at these people. Like, why would they have anything to do with the, actual legal system? Right?
But see, that is the way math works, but it's not the way the law works.
But you can make objectivity and universality out of certain laws. Not all. There are some things where there's gray areas for sure.
You can't, though. I think we have to think about the law differently. See, the law is neither science nor art, and it's certainly not math.
No.
Right? The law is a system of political decisions. It is a system of authority. And it has all kinds of trappings that make it appear as though it is predictable, coherent, reliable, legitimate, and all those things. But those are trappings. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it works very well.
Mm-hmm.
And, it makes decisions that we would think are fair and just, but not always. And that's because it is a system of authority. It's a system backed by the force of the state. And the people inside it are empowered to make decisions that the state will enforce.
Right.
It does not have the same kind of guardrails that math does. Because math, as you're describing, you can take the rules of math and you can apply them and you can figure out whether or not somebody's speaking the truth inside the system of math.
Yep.
Okay? The law is not nearly that rigorous. It has all kinds of loosey-goosey things going on, all kinds of gaps and ambiguities and excuses and trappings and appearances. And it is a way, I would describe it this way. It is a social system of making political decisions that appear to be something other than they really are. And so the faith that people carry in legal decisions as opposed to political decisions, I think, is part of the problem. You are giving the law too much credit for being something that it's not.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because I think of this, because what I like to do to get people so that they can think about this way in more of a micro term, so that doesn't seem so overwhelming. So, like, for example, I don't know about yourself. Actually, do you have any kids there, Bruce?
No.
Oh, okay. Anyways, I have 2 sons, and lots of people. Well, we all, at very least, even if you don't have children, you know people in your life that have children. Yes. And like I say, if you're raising your children, there's obviously got to be some rules, as you would call them, or laws, whatever you want to call them. In your household, you would just probably call them rules. But once again, any human being understanding, even small kids will push back once they recognize a hypocrisy that's within your law. So I remember a perfect example for me as a kid. When I was young, you're about my age, I think somewhere around there, is when I was younger, it was still very much prominent on the East Coast. Not so much where I met my wife. Actually, maybe not you, because I met my wife in Ontario, but on the East Coast here, beating kids was still is very much in fashion, right? So, but I remember as a kid, I threw a snowball up in the air and it come down and hit a girl in the top of the head. Didn't hurt much, or anything like that. It wasn't no big deal, but I got a strap for that. Right. And then other kids would be out in the playground and they would fight, and then they'd get sent in, they'd get strapped for it. And I remember as a kid thinking, well, wait a minute. So basically you're saying that violence is wrong, and yet you're going to use violence to teach me that. This is the part, and this is with our legal system, why I see why the country is in such, not just disarray, but people just don't even have even the basic firm grasp or understanding in terms of ethics, laws, morality, or all these things, is because, once again, it's not just arbitrary, but it's wholly contradictory, because the state literally, as you acknowledge, right, the state is, well, I mean, the state is violence, the state is force. What separates,
Yes.
what makes the state distinctive from us as individuals, it is this presumption that it can use preemptive violence towards people that none of us could do, which to me, I think actually is at the core. Now, the founding fathers of the US, they did a great job. The Constitution, amazing document. I've got the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers. I've read. Amazing the job that those folks did, and for the time frame, the timeline that they were in,
Yep.
like, bow to these men. But we're now 200 and some years later. I think we should be doing our job to or those of us that are at least willing to participate in these things. And I'm grateful for you, Bruce, though, is to get people's mindset up to this, because that's my thing is liberty. First, it begins as a state of mind. And the thing that I'm seeing so distinctly different today is, and I get it, you come up through the American or the Canadian, legal system and the education system. Whereas if I brought a lawyer on, let's say from Texas or something like Ted Cruz or something, they're going to have a completely different interpretation and distinction in terms of laws, because once again, even the founding of America and how that come to exist, very uncomfortable for even Canadians to hear that. Yeah, a bunch of guys, they crossed the Delaware, right? Violence ensued is what actually, because they were defending themselves against the tyrant, right? The king at the time. So that the mindset is now, and that's kind of leading where my question is. So I know this is going to be a tough one, Bruce. I'm just setting it up right now. It's going to be a little bit of a tough question, but it's one of these things that, like I say, it's really important. And because you have a legal background, in addition to being wise and astute in terms of philosophical concepts, is so we seen after the Emergency Act, we seen all this stuff. And that's just the most dominant one that I think are in most Canadian mind. But there was a lot of acts of tyranny that have taken place in recent years in this country. But let me just ask. So at what point, this is the part, and I know, like I say, it's going to be an uncomfortable question, Bruce, and take your time and do whatever. But at what point, so this is my question, is at what point is government tyrannical enough that citizens have the right or even the duty, right, to defend themselves, to use self-defense? And once again, it's not that I ever advocate for violence, but I've been in situations in my life where violence was brought about to me by individuals or a group of individuals. And the only options I had at that time was to basically submit, to allow them to do it, or I had to defend myself, right? And the possibility, depending on how harsh that threat could have meant succumbing my life to these criminals, or defend myself. And this is the part where we're probably getting at today is there even, let's just start with even the legal sphere so that we can't get anyone in trouble, right? Let's say is there anything contained within any document in the legal or the political or the governmental sphere in this country that would even suggest that Canadians, at some point in time, if the government does this, then you should really, do something to defend yourself, right?
No. Inside within the premises of our legal system, the answer is probably no.
Right.
Because our legal tradition, our government tradition is English monarchy.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, those people who were in the 13 colonies at the time, around the time of the Revolution, who did not want to revolt against the authority of the king, came up to Canada to be loyalists. Right. So our defining moment was the opposite of the Americans, which was we want to defer to authority, if you like to put it that way.
Right. Yeah.
And our legal system, if you like, is based upon that idea that you will defer to authority. I mean, just for example, just compare the right to bear arms in the American Constitution, with our gun laws. And it's not in the Constitution, of course, first of all.
Yeah.
But our gun laws are such that I'm just going to guess that if you started to speak openly on social media or whatever about the idea that you owned a gun for the purpose of self-defense, then, I wouldn't be so surprised if the authorities came looking for you to take your gun away, because that is not considered to be a legitimate use of a gun in this country, right? You can use it for hunting and target practice, but you can't keep it under your pillow in case an intruder comes in your house. That's just not not acceptable, right?
Right.
And so the idea that there would be embedded within the legal system a threshold beyond which, you know, the system would say, well, now it's okay for all you people to take up your pitchforks and go march. No. No, the law is the law, and you will obey it.
Right.
Why? Because it's based upon authority. And so we're talking now about ideas that fall outside, right? And that's going to be even true for the American system. I mean, there is the idea as expressed in those founding documents that yes, it is incumbent upon the people. If you get a government that impinges on your liberty, then yes, it's your responsibility to act. But even so, the authorities in that country will not agree that this is the moment where that is being triggered. So let's not be under any illusions. The law is about authority. It's about power. It's about the use of force. And the people who are in control of that system are not going to accept, pretty much under any circumstances, that it is time for the citizens to say no.
So doesn't that basically, you know, inadvertently or actually blatantly suggest that, you know, we're not free human beings. We're basically modern day. It's completely different. It's been retweaked. It's a version, I don't know, 3.04, but it's kind of a modern form of indentured servitude or slavery of some sort. If there's no capacity or there's no point, there's no area where you get to the point where a government can tyrannize you enough that you should have any like legal or even justifiable reason or authority to defend yourself. That seems like a document, basically, you know, like I say, it's tweaked a little different. Sounds like a document written for a plantation or slaves rather than something that's supposed to acknowledge our inherent fundamental right.
But let's go back to the mistake that I suggested. All we've ever done is move power around. And what we did not do
is remove the power.
Is take the power away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we can imagine a different kind of situation altogether, and this is basically my approach to speaking to people of other political persuasions.
Right.
This gets back to, you know, the natural rights, rationality, and objective truth thing. I don't think those are productive ways to make the libertarian point.
Right.
Because the people of other persuasions have their own versions of those things.
Right.
And instead, the difference between the libertarian or classical liberal perspective and the others is the fault line is violence that you alluded to. Right? So one's not moral and the other not moral. One's not natural rights and the other one not natural rights. One's not rational, the other one's not irrational. You know, the difference is violence. Libertarians are inherently peaceful. Yeah. They do not want violence from other people, and they do not want violence from the state. Right. And on those other persuasions do. If you're a progressive and you insist that people use pronouns or whatever, and you want to take people's money to redistribute it, I mean, that's done by force. Let's make a very basic point. A point that some people are reluctant to acknowledge. Right. But nevertheless, it is so, which is every law enforced by the state is a function of force. Yep. Right? Especially laws that govern people's behavior. And so if you are a person, either a progressive or for that matter, a conservative, who wishes to use the law to govern people's behavior, then you are embracing the use of force. You are being violent. Yeah. And so I don't really have any use for the natural rights argument in that context. I don't have much room for the morality argument. My case to them would be this: look, we can be peaceful or we can be violent. Right. And I'm not even making the case to you, and I'm speaking to you as though you're a progressive, for example. Right. I'm not making the case that one is more moral than the other. Now, of course, I believe that peace is morally preferable to violence. But I'm not imposing that moral judgment upon you. Right. I am saying this: you choose. You choose what you want. If you want to choose violence, then choose it. But at least acknowledge that's what you're doing. Yeah. And if you choose to use violence against me, then I'm going to do the same thing against you, and never going to fight. I don't want that.
No.
But you're choosing it. If you do that, that's where we're going to end up. The better choice, the preferable choice for you and for me and everybody else, not because it's inherently moral necessarily, but because it's in your interest to choose that, is a world in which there's no violence.
Right.
But
here's the thing, Bruce. If I think about the Emergencies Act, right? So here's the thing that, like, and why I wanted to emphasize, and I think still to this day, and it's something that eventually we're all going to have to get this understanding that it's liberty truly is a state of mind. So, like I say, the Emergency Act, it's not even like my thing, and of course many different iterations of this kind of talk is basically like, I'm not worried about the guy with the little mustachio, right? Fucking banging on the fucking, the pulpit there. I don't care about that guy. He's no threat to me. He's no threat to millions of people. But the thing is because these people believe, because the way, statism, the belief in government, as far as I'm concerned. Oh, I should have mentioned this earlier on, actually, Bruce, is I'm a libertarian, but philosophically minded. So if I follow the principles, just like with math, you could actually call me an anarchist technically, because I just don't believe that we require rulers. I'm further advanced in my mindset than most people. I don't believe that that's necessary.
So you would call yourself almost an anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah. You could use that terminology, but like I say, what it is at the end of the day, it's funny because there's so many different labels what it is, but how I think of it is just, I don't believe in Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. Why? Because it can be proven that there's objectively true that there is no such thing. And just same with like this thing where we vote and we give these people authorities that we don't even have ourselves. That's the whole pretense. It's all built on, like, to me, it's as far as I'm concerned, which shows how good the propaganda and the indoctrination works, because it's all built on, like, just these will crumble under even the slightest bit of pushback in terms of, so because I ask people, I use 4 questions actually, Bruce, and it throws people for a loop. It only takes 3 of them and actually it's like, do I have an authority to go and take any portion of your income from you without your express or implied permission, right? And of course, any human being that I've ever engaged with would say, of course, you don't have no right or any legitimate authority to do that. You might try to do it. You might try to, hold on, though, Bruce. You might try to take it, but I'm going to defend myself because you have no freaking authority to take my money. So at the bare minimum, I'm going to defend myself. And same with, like, if I said I don't get to impose my way of living on my neighbor and say you have to do everything I say, live how I tell you, nobody would ever agree that. But somehow if I go to a box or go to some place, a polling booth, and check a box, I don't have that authority, but somehow by checking a box, I'm delegating an authority that I don't have. Or even if I get 10 of my fellow citizens together, none of us have that authority, but somehow, boom, magic, through the power of magic, I can delegate an authority that I don't have, or we can delegate an authority that we don't have onto someone else. That to me is the fundamental problem. And I see in Canada, and the mindset in terms of understand what it is to be a free human being, is Canadians have subjected themselves to this belief system where they think that it's legit or it's ethically sound or even legally sound that anyone gets to do things that none of us would be allowed to do. So that I think is the crux. That's the crux of our issue, is Canadians are not in the mindset of even understand what it is to be a free human being. So they don't know how to deal with it, because they have to, like you said, they have to seek out information from an authority, which that authority will then in turn tell them, no, right makes might, I guess. And no, we can magically, through some mystical power, gain an authority that no one's ever granted us because they don't have it. You get where I'm going with that?
Oh, I get where you're going, and I agree with where you're going. But okay. I know lots of people, who wouldn't agree with your presumptions about the first 2 questions.
Oh, for sure.
Right. So if you ask people whether or not they have the authority to take your stuff, to take your money, to redistribute to other people, a lot of them would say, well, of course I do. Of course I do, because that's the way to social justice. or do I have the authority to make you behave in a certain way so as to comply with my moral code? I know lots of people who would say, absolutely, because my moral code is right and yours is wrong. And you are acting immorally, and we have to stop you from doing that.
Right.
I know
but for them to believe that, though, Bruce, like, to me, if someone did say that, like, I get you, I agree with you 100%. I'm not denying that they don't believe that, but then my immediate thing would be, so then if you agree that anyone can grant themselves an authority to then I can do whatever I want to you because I'm granting myself or someone else's. Hey, I'll get a bunch of my neighbors to grant me the authority. They wouldn't agree to that, I don't think, at that point. That's the thing. It's easy when you put yourself in the rational self-interest to suggest that, yes, if it benefits me rationally and it's in my favor, like, of course people can convince themselves of that, but they're not going to be quite susceptible or quite so willing to accept the fact that, well, then that means I get to do the exact same thing to you.
Oh, right? On 100%. But but that's really my point. My point is you have to battle these ideas, these people, on a different playing field.
Yeah,
because they don't care about the things that we think are important.
You're right. Yeah,
you have to challenge them to acknowledge that they're embracing something that they don't want to admit that they're embracing.
Yes,
they are embracing violence.
Yeah, exactly.
And the only answer to that is choose yourself. Do it yourself.
Yeah.
But if you choose that, then the rest of us are going to choose that too. Is that really where you want to go?
Right.
The only alternative to violence is peace. No interference.
Yeah.
So if you want to live in a peaceful world as we do,
right,
then don't impose force on me. Everything will be fine. If you do, all bets are off.
Yeah. Well, that's I'm glad you went with it like that, Bruce, because that, to me, don't you think that is the big, like that 800-pound gorilla of a conversation? Now we're having it, but obviously, I mean, you've got probably a decent fall. Mine's kind of fallen off in recent years because apparently people don't like getting too much truth all at once. But anyways, either way, whatever the reason is behind it, it's neither here nor there. But we're having these conversations, and some smaller or other actors having the conversations. But don't you think that that's kind of the discourse for the people that do have like larger audience and stuff? Because that was another concern with me too. And like, I don't normally like to talk about other people. I prefer to discuss ideas and stuff. But even things like I say, I have great admiration for Jordan Peterson and some of the other prominent voices who are Canadian, who are speaking, and I support them wholeheartedly and a lot of the stuff they stand for, and I'm right there with them. But I still feel that there's a serious lack in terms of the discussion to get to the point where we're at today. So that, like I say, because to me, I don't even think, here's what it is. As long as you and I, and at least the plurality of the majority of the Canadian citizens, as long as we have the mindset so we understand baseline, right? What does it mean to be a free human being? Then all of these other conversations, the dialogues, the interactions, if there even at some point in time we have to have a constitutional convention or a redrafting of the Bill of Rights, whatever has to take place. My whole thing is, without having the proper mindset, then we're always and forever just going to be back to this might makes right, or whoever's got the best propaganda or can be the best sophist or can offer the best rhetoric, right? That's where we end up with. And my concern as not just a Canadian, but a human being, and I have offspring and I have to think about the future, is we should really, I mean, this is a very unique time for us as humans. Now we're living in it, so it's a little harder for us to kind of get the full grasp and understanding. Like, the internet is the Gutenberg press on steroids for us as human beings. And like I say, I think, and I've kind of coined my own little phrase, let's try to usher in Enlightenment Era 2.0. And I think we're kind of on the precipice, or kind of in the middle of it a little bit right now. But like I say, the biggest conversations that I seem to be most predisposed and concerned about is getting human beings. Now, being a Canadian, being on this particular plantation, I worry about my backyard more than anyone else's. Is I just want to at least hear these kinds of conversations and dialogue taking place, rather than the people that have an expert mind and have high credentials and stuff like that, and high IQs. Rather than having conversation and saving the real good stuff for behind the scenes, my kind of, just like when I was raising my kids, I'll tell them the stuff and let them work through it and help them work through it. But I don't want to hide them from it, because I think it's too much for them to handle. To me, I think the basis for a lot of our conversations should be like where we're going at today is let's talk about what does it mean to be a free human being, and then all of the things that we can do after the fact, because I think people will make much wiser decisions, whether you're talking progressives, libertarians, conservatives, anyone. I don't care what your political ideology, or I think you'll have at least a better chance of having better discourse and a better outcome if, at bare minimum, the people who are having them and the audience understands what it even means to be a free human being. Because then we get better, like, we're not leaving dark spots, right? That's the biggest thing that I think. But anyways, what's your thoughts on that, Bruce?
I think there are a lot of people who who uh, um, who believe that they are freedom people.
Right.
But if you push them a little bit and test them a little bit, it's not always so.
Mm.
Because what they mean, and this for my money, this is the debate that we need to have on the right.
Mm.
I mean, we're all against the progressive woke crap,
Right.
which has us under their thumb.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a divide on the right between a lot of people who consider themselves freedom people about what that means.
Right.
Like you're alluding to.
Yeah.
And the distinction, as I've said this before, the distinction is between those people who believe that freedom means the lack of coercion. That is, people not interfering with you, especially the state, but other people too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people who believe that freedom means to restrain your animal instincts. That is, to behave in a manner that is consistent with the good, which requires restraint, and sometimes requires restraint from the state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those two kinds of freedom are incompatible politically.
Yeah.
You cannot believe in lack of coercion and also believe that the job of the state is to limit your behavior so that you behave properly.
Yeah, true.
Okay,
Yeah.
that latter idea is what I would call a common good conservative view, which is the progressives are a problem, but the real progressive problem is not too little liberty, but too much liberty to, go off and do whatever you want, to call yourself a woman, to change your gender, to engage in this and take drugs, and that they don't. The people that I'm speaking about don't believe in any of that.
Right.
The libertarians do.
Yep.
Libertarians think you should be able to do whatever you want, as long as you're not imposing it upon other people.
Right.
You can call yourself a woman if you want to, and the rest of us are free to say you're full of nonsense.
Yeah.
Okay? The conservatives, I mean, I'm thinking about a particular, cast of conservatives now, the common good conservatives.
Yeah.
Many of them do not believe that.
No.
Many of them believe that there is a code, and that the job of the state is to make us comply with the code. And so we need to have that conversation as much as any other.
Yeah.
Because we have a real tension on the right amongst those people who are all working together to push back on the woke stuff.
Right.
We do not agree with each other about what the problem actually is. Is it too little liberty, as you and I would say? Or is it too much liberty, as some others would say? That's a real problem.
Yeah, well, that actually reminds me of you and David Haskell, and that was a great.
Exactly.
That was amazing, Bruce. I was actually really great, and I was kind of glad to hear. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure that he was just doing that, just playing devil's advocate. I don't think that he was fully believing everything that he was saying, and I get it, because you did the same for Jordan Peterson when you took the other side of the position. And good for you guys for being willing to show that you have the gumption to take the other side and steel man the argument. I think that's actually really important. It shows.
So I don't want to speak for David,
right?
And
okay.
And David, listen, David. I love David. He's got all kinds of good ideas, and he does have a real liberty streak in him.
Right.
But he also has some genuine conservative beliefs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can
which are difficult to reconcile. So I wouldn't want to speak for him and tell him exactly where the line is drawn in his mind, but he wasn't entirely putting it on, I wouldn't say.
No. You could tell there was some subtleties in there that probably did resonate with him, but at least, like I say, at least it came across to me. It come across an example, and this is actually what I think needs to take place much more, in across this country. And I don't know if people have prominence or voices or who have venues that they can use for these things, but this is the kind of thing that I think could really help elevate the discourse and people, the Canadians' mindset on these things. And I think that, as far as I'm concerned, I think they're kind of chomping at the bit, because I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. You come from academia, so you might have more knowledge. You've probably interacted with more people than I have over the course of my life, in terms of, because you had big classrooms. But a lot of Canadians that I talk to, and I've been all over this country, I've lived across the country, but even something as simple as the term collectivism, a lot of Canadians don't even know what that word, they've never even heard that word before. And to me, it's the lack of this baseline knowledge, or even some of these terms or phrases that are used by Americans, like quite regularly, quite loosely. And it actually, Americans, especially in the libertarian circles or even the classical liberal, you talk about collectivism, they automatically know, like, you're not just talking about fascists. See, Canadians will talk about fascists or communists or socialists and keep playing this left versus right, but a collectivist is, like you were saying, it's basically even some of the old religious people, the Christians in the past, right? It should be okay to subjugate and sacrifice the individual for, like, this concept of the greater good. But once again, it always comes back to, well, who's defining the greater good? So I get that, but that, to me, even just something as simple of not understanding the difference between individual liberty and collectivism, I think even just those, even if Canadians at least even understand those two words, it'd probably give them at least a little bit better of a mindset, where they would be more susceptible, to listen to the kind of things that you or I would talk about, right?
Right. Well, and here's on that point, here's one thing that I like to talk to the non-libertarians about, because they have a perception that's incorrect.
Okay.
And I've used these terms too: collectivism, individualism, absolutely.
Yep.
But the critics of liberalism or libertarianism say, well, you don't believe in collectives, you don't believe in groups, you don't believe in the family, you don't believe in community, you don't believe in religious organizations. And my answer to them is that's not true at all. That's not true in the slightest. When we use the word collectivism,
I'm all about the family.
Absolutely, we are talking about coerced collectivism. Collectivism by force. So the real distinction that I like to use, or try to, I've used individualism and collectivism, but the real, I think the more informative division to use is voluntary and involuntary.
Yeah, that's good too.
Voluntary groups are great. If you want to start a family, fabulous. If you want to join a church, great. If you want to have a community, I mean, of course, human beings are social animals. You should be together with your people. The point is, you can decide for yourself who your people are. That's all.
Exactly.
We don't want people to live as, atomized individuals. No. We just don't want the state to tell you what to do. That's all.
Right. Yeah. No, that's actually a good distinction and a great point, Bruce, because and I think from the Canadian context and the Canadian mindset, that probably would be a better way to go about it, because once again, they're not in or familiar with the term. So you kind of would have to spend a lot of time explaining the terminology to them. But I think if you go about it both versus voluntary versus involuntary, that's a good way. Anyway, so let me just ask here's another thing. So I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but I'm just curious, because another thing that even when our countries were set up, and Canada would have been the same thing, is we didn't have such rampant wealth and income redistribution early on in our countries, right? So, you can think even in Canada, and I share this constantly on a regular basis, that we didn't even have such thing as an income tax prior to 1917. And how it was even sold to the Canadian public at the time was it was temporary in nature. It was to pay for World War I. It was, I think, 3% or 2 or 3% for businesses. And then I don't know if it's 1 or 2% for well off or well-to-do Canadian individuals, but it was very minute. And once again, under the auspices or the pretense that it was due to pay for the war. To today, like, I don't know, the latest Fraser Institute thing is what is it, like 46-48% just for like taxes, and that's in excess. I think it's 42 or 44% to pay for everything that we require, like housing, food, and all that stuff. So that the government now takes in excess or more, right, in taxation than what we even require to sustain ourselves. When did Canadians get the point? I gotta think prior to, let's say, in the 1950s, when a lot of these entitlement and socialist programs were coming to existence, stuff, Canadians, at least most Canadians at the time, would have, at least because it was the absence of having the redistributed state. So I would imagine most Canadians at the time would have thought, like, they would have looked at you like you had three heads if you said, "Oh, you mean I can go and vote to take shit away from my neighbor? I have this thing where I can just go vote for that, right? It wasn't just a matter of voting what government you wanted in terms of, keeping the peace and being the referee and all that stuff. No, it's now I have this thing where I can vote, right, to take away stuff. That is another thing. Do you yourself know, or is it just like that boiling frog approach where it just happened so many times? It was used under the excuse of, it was like just like with the income tax, and then people just get used to it and accept it. But or was there, as far as you're concerned, any particular time frame where this mindset shifted to the point where, yeah, now you can actually, it's legitimate to even go solicit government or lobby government to take from one person to give to person B?
Right. No, I don't think there's any one moment in time. This is a matter of encroaching managerialism.
Right. Yeah.
Most people alive today have grown up in a society in which there is a managerial state.
Yeah.
And it has steadily grown over time from the early 1900s, let's say, to where it is today. But most people believe that the job of that we have a government for the purpose of solving social problems. That's what they think it's for.
Right.
And if it's necessary to take taxes to do that, well, then that's just part of the territory. If you walked out on this sidewalk today and said, well, ask somebody at random, do you think we should have an administrative state? First of all, they might not know what you're talking about. But if you explained what you meant, like, should we have all these people in bureaucracies and ministries and departments and expertise to do this and that and make policy? Yeah. They might look at you like, well, what do you mean? That's what government is. What else is it for? But to solve social problems. I mean, so we're talking about a conception of government to which people don't understand that there are alternatives. It's the only government they've ever known.
Yeah.
So the idea that, that the income tax rate is too high, well, it's only too high compared to what it was 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, it was, I don't know what it was, but let's say, it was, instead of 46% that you cite, maybe it was 30-something percent. It's like, well, now it's, now it's too high. Back then it was fine. Now it's too high. Well, 35% is too high too. Like 10% is too high. It's taking by force the stuff that you have earned for yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very difficult to get people across that threshold.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, to me, I just keep thinking, and I forget who exactly to attribute it to, but I remember listening to someone early on years ago talking about this stuff in terms of kind of using the slaves and plantation of the old world form of slavery, actual human ownership, where you actually had a contract you signed and people believed that it was legitimate, knowing other human beings. But actually, if you think about it, so people today say, oh yeah, 46%, or even if it's 50, in excess of 50, 60%, but they're not taking into account actually even slaves, full on slaves in the old world or the American South, even just 100 years ago or so, let's say, is they, right? If you think about it, or even if you don't want to use other human beings, there's lots of ways to correlate this or associate this. But let's just say, even in Canada, if you own a horse, right, you're gonna make sure that horse has got food, right? Right? Even if you claim that you own it, just like with slaves in the past. Well, that horse, to be productive, well, you got to feed it. You got to make it's got shelter from the elements, right? Or at least the most harshest of elements. So there's going to be a percentage of whatever that person produced, even the old world form of slavery, that would have been attributed or used for themselves, for their own consumption. So at what point in time?
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
So I've put it this way. I've said it's like I've called it state singularity. We're approaching state singularity. Yeah. By that I mean we're approaching the moment where state and society are becoming one thing. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting very close. In the sense that the state, what the state does not take away from you in the form of taxation, it supervises. Right? So it supervises your work, it supervises your home, it supervises your activities, your kids, your education, and so on down the line. You can't do anything without some kind of rules and regulations and guidelines and discretionary decisions.
Yeah.
And people, the non-libertarians sort of just shake their heads when they hear us speak this way, but it is true that you work for the state, even if you don't work for the state, if you know what I mean. Yeah. If you are giving 46% of your earnings to the state, then you are working for the state.
Right.
And you are not allowed not to. And when you own property in busy urban centers that you don't live in, and you have to pay an extra tax, you are now working for the state.
Right.
Right. And so it's not just a case now of having, gone too far. We're getting so far along that people are beginning to expect almost that the state is managing the store, and that whatever needs to be done, the state must do it, because the state's the only one who's equipped with the expertise and the resources to fix the problem, whatever it happens to be. Now, of course, they never notice that they never fixed the problem. The state's record in fixing problems is horrendous, right? But people don't notice that because they don't see any other way to do it, because they've been under the administrative state so long that there are no real other sort of non-government institutions that exist to solve problems.
Right.
So we're in a real bind. I mean, the idea of going or achieving an actual sort of libertarian governing system, we're so far away from that. I mean, the problem right now is simply not to pass through our event horizon and get sucked down to the state singularity at the core of the abyss.
Right. Yeah. Well, that to me, and I'm just going to run this out there and think, because one good thing is geographically, and even because our consumption, as much as the Canadian, control freaks and the ruling establishment try to, reduce or limit our consumption of American stuff because they're so anti-American, but because of our geography, because of our history, because of the ease of in which, like, I use Starlink for crying out, and I can get access to anything that's American, and so can most Canadians, to be honest with you. But now that we're seeing, and this to me, this is going to be quite profound and is going to be very interesting going forward. So just like what you were saying, here's what I'm worried about. So with Trump, the rise of Trump in the South thing, I actually think it has real potential because of the fact that Trump is the proverbial bull in the china shop. Yes. I also believe that while that destruction is taking place, that I believe that it can distract a lot of people, and some really good things could happen and take place behind the scene to further entrench and enshrine these concepts, this liberty. But it could also go the other way, whereas because Trump is now this figurehead, and he's the guy that's everyone's looking to save. Well, and even libertarians, although I see the pragmatic, I'm not against the libertarians. I see the pragmatic approach with at least trying to align with Trump somewhat in the hopes that, we can, kind of help persuade him to move in certain ways. And I've actually seen that's taken place. Well, not just by his pardon of Ross Ulbricht and the likes, but also the fact that he went to the convention and he realized that it was the libertarians that helped, him and his subordinate in different ways. But as Canadians, as we watch this unfold, my concern, obviously, and I'm sure it must be yours as well, is this going to turn out like you say? So if it goes the way I'm hoping, and they get more of a liberty or a live, let live mentality, because Americans are just so sick and tired of fighting each other that they've wore themselves out. They've exhausted themselves to a point, and they kind of try to at least get back to the roots, even if they don't want to come together and sing Kumbaya in unity. But the bare minimum, they're like, okay, they're getting ready to fuck with us. We fuck with them for years. How about let's just put the gun down for a little while and see what we can do. That's a potential. But once again, it could also, and which if it does, as Canadian observing, no matter who you are on the political spectrum, I guarantee Canadians observing what's taking place in the US, because it will definitely have a profound influence on Canadians, whether they like it or not. It's going to have an effect on us. And if Canadians see, I'm even seeing today, if I had said, as a Canadian, we should be part of the U.S. as a 51st state, even as a joke, even a lot of people that agree with me would have been up in arms and outraged. Nowadays, because they're seeing this play out, Canadians, where the Americans, it looks ugly, but that's the same with anyone. That fight is the fact that Americans are fighting and having this dispute and these big discussions tells you that at least they're striving to try to get somewhere. Whereas Canadians, what we're seeing is everyone's tamped down or silenced, or voices are suppressed. We're not allowed to engage with each other. I'm luckily we're at least being able to, but maybe I'm not getting out to enough people that I'm of no threat. I let them just function in their little circle over there, right? But as we see this taking place, Americans will either show with this, as far as I'm concerned, that the best thing that you can do is place the state back in its box, so that's not such a threat, and we can kind of get on with our lives. And I believe that if the economics takes place in a way that's beneficial and congruent to that, then that might very well be a reality, because once again, rational self-interest for most people is going to dominate everything, right? But if it doesn't, yes, then we're talking to a point where now it truly is, we can really devolve into the state where it's a zero-sum game, and each side now is just a matter of, well, everyone's racing to pick up the proverbial gun in the room because they recognize and perceive the grave threat if the opponents have it. Anyways, I guess there should have been a question in that there, but basically what I was thinking is, shouldn't we, I think, rather than just sitting and watching how it plays out in Canada, and you have some decent connections with some folks, like I say, I think we should be trying to have more of these kinds of discussions that are on like these levels where we're talking about ideas, what it means, like, but with more of a prominent voice, or somewhere where you have a larger venue where you can get more Canadians on it. Because what I've seen with Jordan Peterson and yourself is obviously Canadians are chomping on the bit and very, very much interested in listening to something that's thinking at least outside of the current paradigm and the box. So there's an audience for it. I firmly believe, though, that we're constantly messed with all the time to make it so that it's much more difficult to get those audience, or at least to get together. And especially in the physical space in a country like our own, which we're spread so far apart, it's really difficult to do that in the physical space. But luckily with the social media, we can do that. So what do you think of the idea of as Canadians, rather than just sit and watching how the American experiment is going to play out, and see, let's try, just like with the truckers convoy, let's try to take the reins of our own destiny and our own future, and see if we can, maybe even use our competitive mindset in some way, if there's anyone left in Canada that has it, right? No, but there are, but and see what we can't do maybe to increase that kind of discourse and conversations and dialogue, because I think that's what Canadians need. They need to be treated like adults, instead of just, let all the big boys sit and talk, or boys and girls that talk, and when we got it all figured out, we'll let you know how that works out. Right? And what are your thoughts on that there, Bruce?
I think we would be better off as part of the U.S.
Yeah, I actually, go ahead, continue on that. Expand on that. Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen as a country.
Yeah.
The potential for serious reform of the way this country is governed as a country is virtually non-existent.
Yeah, sure.
We have a constitutional structure that has an extremely demanding amending formula. It's very difficult to conceive of anything meaningful happening, and even if it could, you might fear that it would go in the wrong direction anyway.
Yeah,
and there are embedded interests in this country, especially federally, but not just federally, that would have no interest in any kind of either serious reform or in joining the states, because their status depends upon Canada being a country. Canada is their small pond.
Yeah,
if they're going to be big fish, they have to have Canada, but that is not in our interest. And the U.S. has things that we would be better off with than without, like their constitution.
Yeah.
Like their tradition of liberty. I mean, they've had a lot of problems. They're not in good shape either, but they are in better shape than we are.
Yeah.
And that's because they still have this idea embedded deep in their historical background, in their generational memory, that they are a country based upon the idea of liberty.
Yeah.
We do not have that.
Right.
And so I think, a door has been opened. It won't be open for very long. I think my preference would be, in my ideal world, the people of Alberta would hold a referendum.
Yeah.
They would vote themselves to decide to leave Canada and negotiate to join the U.S. and maybe along with Newfoundland. My colleague Larry Solomon has suggested this, that it should be two provinces, one leading to the right, which is Alberta, and one leading to the left, which is Newfoundland. Newfoundland has a history of, before it joined Canada, it was playing with the idea of going to the States anyway. They could revive that thought. But if you had Alberta and Newfoundland leaving Canada and joining the U.S., my guess would be that would start a cascade. All the provinces would start to move in that direction, because it would become apparent that that's what they had to do. Ontario, Quebec might be the last holdouts because Ontario, Quebec hold the most centralized, power base in the
Yeah.
country. Maybe
Yeah.
Quebec would become its own country finally. I don't know.
Mm.
The power base in Ontario would be very reluctant, but if they were left on their own at the end, they would probably come on board. But I don't know. The first stage, let's not worry about all the end details. Let's worry about the
Right.
first move.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the first
Yeah.
move is if you're in Alberta, hold a referendum.
Yeah.
See if this is you've been abused in Confederation. See if this is a way through.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as an Atlantic Canadian, I actually think that would be great. And as a father who's raised kids, and as someone who's been around lots of other people who've raised kids, is our East Coast, and I think it's getting upwards in excess of over half, or it was just under half of the entire budget of New Brunswick comes from transfer payments. So we're the proverbial welfare state, and there's nothing worse. Just like when I was raising my boys, there'd be nothing worse that I could have done to my boys than to constantly bail them out and constantly propping them up. I can't even imagine what they would have turned out to be, in comparison to contrast to the individual, independent-minded folks that they are today. But that's a big thing that could really, really help, I think, Atlantic Canadians to proverbially pull up the bootstrap and start to think about these things. They wouldn't be so susceptible to turning down in New Brunswick, where I live, NIMBYism is just unbelievable in terms of, and it is an older, a very aging demographic in this province. But in terms of any commerce or building any kind of industry or anything to give the people of this province some real potential, it's basically null and void. And it's a shame because most of them, just like my parents did when I was a kid, and why I was raised most of my life in Ontario, in Scarborough, to be honest with you, was because a lot of them had to leave these jurisdictions, leave their families behind to seek out better alternatives in different parts of the country. And that's a sad reality. I really think that the Alberta is a key figure or a key component of our federation, that yes, if they did leave because of the fact that there's so many other parts of this country that does rely on those who do, pull up the bootstrap, work and produce and provide, I think that would be a great wake up call for a lot of people. And I think could be a real benefit and a real boon for our country as far as that goes. So, yeah.
And so, in my ideal vision, and there's lots of pieces to this puzzle, but two parts that people I think should keep in mind. Here are two possibilities. Yep. Number one, if Alberta, for example, was to come on board to the U.S., the term would be that every Canadian dollar in Alberta would be honored as an American dollar, as 1-to-1.
Yeah,
right. Because if you join the U.S., you don't want to become a U.S. citizen that suddenly is not able to live, because our dollar is now falling in comparison to theirs.
Yeah.
So that I think it's a fair term, but also to take the opportunity, and maybe this is blue skying a bit too much, but my ideal situation would be this: that if you had a mandate from the people of Alberta to do this, and you're talking to the Americans, especially the present administration. Now, 4 years is not a very long time, and who knows how long this would take, and who knows who's going to follow. But let's imagine for a minute. If you go to the Americans and say, "We want to join your country, and we are Alberta. We have oil. We have all kinds of good stuff. 1-to-1 on the dollar. And while we're all at it, how about you take this opportunity to tweak your constitution? Like, not to make it more Canadian. We're not asking for that.
No, definitely not.
Right? But to tweak it so that your American constitution is a bit more American. As in, let's help you defeat your administrative state, because that's one thing that you've expressed a desire to do yourselves anyway. Let's take the opportunity. We'll put it. It's doable. It's doable to make a couple of constitutional amendments, which would undermine the deep state, make it impossible for the deep state to flourish. So, in the course of joining this country with a more robust constitution, with a more robust tradition of liberty, with a willingness to have arguments about things in the open, to air your dirty laundry, which is one thing that we don't do in Canada. And then and to take that opportunity to improve the place you're going to.
Yeah.
and create a path for the rest of this country to follow. I it would be difficult,
Mhm.
but it wouldn't be impossible.
Yeah. You know, the more of the, and listen to you talk, the more I think about it, and the more as I go forward, it probably will be. It almost seems like it does seem to, in terms of the viability of any kind of solution that could possibly take place, that seems to be about the only one that does seem to be viable for us Canadians, because the typical Canadian mindset is, like you mentioned earlier, and I've known this for a long time. Like I say, I don't just talk to people online, even out in my workplace. I love to talk to people because then I can gauge where their mindset. And yeah, it's not just online. No, there's a lot of our Canadians out in our physical space that sadly, and it's demoralizing at times, but yeah, very, very much, fully entrenched in the statism thing and just don't think critically about these things at all. But yeah, like if it was something, that's another thing we all recognize. We don't even require a plurality or a majority of people to get in the right mindset. You just need, like I say, something to happen where there's an incentive structure. And if Alberta became a 51st state, the East Coast lost their ability to keep living off of them. There's so many things that would change the paradigm that it would have nothing other than the fact that something would have to be done, and that would create and present the opportunity that you're suggesting. Anyways, Bruce, I won't keep you too long, probably about 2 more questions maybe or so, but there was just a couple other things I wanted to talk about. So I'm not even sure if you yourself are familiar. There's a few key files that I've been just trying to hammer away on for years. And if I could get even maybe hear you or maybe some other prominent voices, because it's kind of frustrating, the fact that there's so many Canadians in our country who are so lacking of I think it's pretty profound and important knowledge, because I mean, the housing crisis and mass immigration, all this stuff, everyone recognizes, and the overwhelming aspects of our healthcare system. COVID showed just how, but the part that especially the housing thing. So there's lots of people, outside investors, some of the wealthier to do older generations that are buying up houses and rent seeking. But the biggest thing to me was Americans. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but I'm sure you probably are. But you can just answer me after I point out. But so after the financial crisis, and it took a few years, so it wasn't 07, 08. In Canada, it was around 11, 12. But there was a big, massive bailouts of all of our major banks in this country. All of the establishment media had to report on it, of course. That's the thing. It's like people talk about the media in terms of things where they get too sensationalized and too conspiratorial. You just got to think, and you would be able to do that easily. Just think from the legal standpoint is, they can't necessarily outright lie to you, right? But they can omit things. You can misrepresent. You can, misinterpret, or anyways, they did. So I suppose it would have been, you had to report on the fact that we had bailouts in this country, but it happened one time, and I've been paying close, astute attention ever since. Never talked about it. And every time it's ever been brought up in terms of our housing crisis or the financial crisis, the rhetoric I've always heard repeated and put on repeat is, our banks came out, they were sound, they come out on the other side of the financial crisis, intact and whole. But in reality, if you read the report, and like I share it constantly, you can find it on any of my social media platforms or pages, is actually one of the banks was bailed out to the tune of, if you bought every one of the shares, I don't know if it was Royal Bank or Scotiabank, but basically it was bailed out to the tune of, you could have bought every share in the bank and then recapitalize it to the tune of half of that, and that's how much they took in the bailout. So, and if you think about in terms of the housing crisis, now American, when they went through theirs and Lehman Brothers collapsed, bare minimally, now there was still a lot of central planning, a lot of manipulation, a lot of distortion of the market, but bare minimally, they at least gave the American people, in particular the young one, a little bit of reprieve by allowing some market corrections, right? So the housing prices did drop down substantially in some of those really massively overvalued markets in the US, whereas Canada, not only did the bailouts happen, but there was no reprieve whatsoever. And to this day, and then of course with the worst policies that Trudeau has brought about as a consequence of this, and this all happened under the Harper regime, by the way, folks. So once again, I'm not left versus right, liberal versus conservative. Yep. This happened under the leadership of Mr. Free Market himself, Stephen Harper, right? But I firmly believe that it might have been, detrimental in some way, in some regards, but I think in actually allowing a market correction would have been a great boon for not just the younger people and the extenuating effects or circumstances that how that would have played out in terms of allowing millions of our younger people to be able to get their foothold into the housing market. How that would have affected, the Canadian psyche or a lot of things, or even our economics would have been so profound, I believe. But are you, or the circles that you normally, talk or associate, are you folks, or are you acknowledging the same thing that I'm acknowledging, that Canadians are completely oblivious to this knowledge?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure.
You are too. Okay, well that's kind of, yeah. So that's I didn't even need much of an answer, because that's what I was wondering. Is it just me and the kind of circles I find myself in, or are
but remember, the circles that I'm talking about, I think the ones that you're asking about are
probably fairly similar.
Yes, right.
Exactly. Or some overlap. Yeah.
So for my money, if you're not if you are in the political realm,
mm-hmm.
and you're serious about the kinds of ideas that we are talking about,
right,
then one of the things on your agenda ought to be to eliminate the central bank.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. If you're not saying the Federal Reserve should go in the U.S., the Bank of Canada has to go. I mean, lot of our there's a lot of blame to go around with all these things.
For sure, right? Yeah.
But a lot of the blame lies at the feet of the Bank of Canada.
Yeah.
For all kinds of things that it does, fractional reserve lending,
mm-hmm.
Money supply,
stimulus.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's just a completely bad concept.
Yeah.
And so one of my criticisms of a lot of these political actors, who, even the ones who have acknowledged the problem,
mm-hmm.
the solutions don't make any sense.
No,
right?
I haven't heard any.
Right. So the problem you have identified, I think, is real. Nobody really understands how the thing works, and probably by design. They're not designed to know how it works, because if they actually knew, they might be outraged.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can't imagine. That's what I've always said. And I've talked about this with as many people as willing to listen. And my wife probably more times than she's probably wanted to hear. But yeah, it's this thing that we're all susceptible to with the like we go through, not only in the modern age we live in. Like when I was growing up, there was quite a substantial portion of my demographic, Gen Xers, that dropped out grade 9 or 10. I did, and went into work in the construction field. But a lot of the younger people today, you're getting larger and larger portions of our younger demographics that are staying in school, going through high school, and not just that, going into post-secondary and going into university and college. And it kills me to see that all these people are coming out, and I think it is by design, like you say, because how could you go through anywhere upwards of 15, 16 years of education and not even have even the baseline understanding of how the actual economy, the economic system, the financial system, all this? Like, to me, it's like, what do you need all this education for if you're not at least getting the baseline? First of all, no one's teaching you what it is, not even in your own family. Apparently, no one's even teaching you what it is to be a free human being. And then and because money, basically, everything that we do outside the social realm is done through economic transactions and stuff. So you don't know what it is to be free, and you don't even have any idea of the thing that's so important in your life, what it even represents or how it comes about, or right?
One thing that maybe we should just chat about briefly is an area of weakness for a lot of libertarians.
Okay, yeah.
Which is the borders.
Oh yeah, the open border guys.
Right? A lot of libertarians are open border libertarians.
Usually, though, Bruce,
I do not understand that.
I'll tell you who most of them are and sorry to interrupt you there, but most of the ones that I've come across that are the open border libertarians. Now, doesn't mean, of course, there's always exceptions and outliers. Most of them, because I will even say early on when I learned about this, I was a little bit more leaning to that because I didn't know the concepts quite as well. Usually, if they're open border libertarians, they're fairly new to the concept. You know what I mean? Typically.
Well, not all of them, though.
No, not all for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of them are adamant that people need to move freely from place to place, just like goods do.
Right.
And that's the thing.
That's the thing. That's the thing. Like people like myself and the disagreements that we have with it, and we talk to them about it, is yes, I'm with you with the open border concept in terms of no one should have the ability to prevent you from, living in certain places. But the minute the welfare state is introduced, the minute you do have borders and boundaries where certain people are subjected in certain ways, is you don't just like with the property rights, you don't get to just impose yourself, right? That's the problem that like the open border people have, is like, we should allow everyone in, but then you have a welfare state. Well, if we're already against, which you would normally the libertarian would agree with you, well, you're against forced income or wealth redistribution, right? Yes, okay. Well, then even if it's your own domestic citizens, right, we're against that. So then how the hell could you say it's okay to bring more people in? So there's even more rampant. Like, to me, I don't know how to square that, right?
I like to think about it this way. So here's a metaphor.
Yeah.
A country, any country, the country belongs to its citizens.
Yeah.
Like, it's not exactly a property thing, but we'll think about it that way. Right?
Yeah.
So if those people are the ones who own the country, then no authority ought to be able to allow other people into the country unless the people want it that way.
Yeah.
Now you're infringing their ability to exclude from the territory, right?
Yeah.
So the actors, the units of a libertarian society, for my money, are the citizens of the country you're talking about, within the borders, right? That's the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Okay. We're talking about, rights you have, against your state and so on. But most of those rights are rights held by citizens. Not everybody around the world. They don't have status.
No.
They don't have rights in your country. They don't have the right to claim anything. They don't. Right. If I can put it crudely, in these respects, those people don't count.
No,
right?
Absolutely.
And then and sure, I'm not saying like a closed border, like nobody gets in. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that the degree to which the borders have been open, have threatened the nature of the society.
Yes.
Because it's so much, so fast, and under those terms that you referred to, the terms of a welfare state, just giving out stuff hand over fist at a rate that it cannot afford.
No,
it's just asking for trouble, and it's one of the reasons why our housing prices are beyond the reach of Canadians who make ordinary salaries.
Yeah.
So it's just been a disaster.
It's basically just like with the central bank, these policies, you're basically you're picking winners or losers in the economy is what you are, arbitrarily when you're doing these things. And I agree with you there. Actually, I should have added one more thing when I mentioned about the typical open border types. Yes, a lot of them are the ones that are early adopters, are starting to learn about some of these concepts in terms of libertarian principles. But actually, another large cohort of people who seem to be, or at least they advocate for being open borders, are big business guys. There's nothing. A big business guy likes any more than be able to pluck all the brain power from another country and pay them at rock bottom prices, right? So yeah, there's that. So sorry if I left that particular out. But anyways, so I got another question for you, Bruce, and this is something. So this would be, I guess, kind of it's an idea, but it would kind of be in the political realm. So I think it's not quite on the same range of the other stuff we've been talking about so far. But I heard them even talk about this in the US. And I think actually I mentioned this years ago when I first started learning about these, like whether it was Bitcoin or Ethereum at the time, is how they're built is under the underlying structure, as you're probably familiar, is blockchain. It's basically a ledger. It's a public ledger is what it is, right? And it can't be spoofed or manipulated, right? It's encrypted. And to me, and I think this is great, and this might be something, hopefully, if it happens, would be just freaking amazing for the Americans if they could lead in some way. But it's something I think would be really good to adopt in Canada, regardless if we remain our own independent country or not. But for regardless of what side of the political spectrum, I would think most people at least pretend that they want to hold government to account, whether it's the liberals saying we got to hold Pierre to account, or it's the conservatives say we got to hold Trudeau to account. Well, if you put government spending on something like a blockchain or a ledger, once again, I think that is something that's not even very difficult to implement. It doesn't remove our individual privacy rights, because we as individuals, it would just mean that everything that when the government's doing its income redistribution or wealth redistribution or taking taxes or whatever, at least there would be a public ledger that couldn't be spoofed, couldn't be politically manipulated or use, rhetoric, political language to tell Canadians that, black is white and up is down, right? There would be irrefutable evidence to prove when these governments are doing things that are detrimental to our economic bottom line. Is that something that you think that is even potential, or is there any other rumblings of anyone in Canada that's even brought this up? Maybe someone that is even in the political realm. I haven't heard anyone like Pierre Poilievre say anything like that, but
the people who run this show are not going to be inclined to do that.
No.
I mean, even the people before they get into power who lecture about wanting transparency in government. I mean, it's legion, the number of people who have done that, then gotten into power and then been secretive about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like the idea. It would be the way to go so that everybody could see all the time the dollars that your government is spending.
Yeah.
100%. But I don't think there's very much prospect of it. And also, let me add this. So yep. one of the responses people have when they find out how much government spends, they find out about the corruption and the boondoggles and so on, is to want to put into place accountability mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
Like they want reporting structures, and they want more officials who have the job of overlooking to see what's happening and to report and to audit and so on. And all that does is add to the size of the government. Like, it's not just that we should know what they're spending, we should, but that the whole thing should be smaller.
Yeah.
Like,
well, actually, a public ledger or blockchain, you could remove a lot of the bureaucracy, because then it would be done kind of in an automated way.
So right. So your transparency and your accountability and your spending problems are so acute.
Yeah.
Because the government is so dominant and so big, right? So the real way to fix that is not to watch over it more carefully. It's to slash and slash and slash and slash, so that nobody cares that much. If you have a tiny wee little government, it's not very powerful, spends a little money, it takes 3% instead of 2% of your money. I mean, like, right. Okay, so what, right? We're concerned because it's dominating the playing field.
Yeah. Well, that's actually,
right.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something I've had a conversation with and years ago, but it's good to sharpen your knowledge, to have some of these good, interactions and debates, even boisterous and vigorous debates with other libertarians and anarchists. But like I've said, and I've become more pragmatic, I suppose, as I'm getting older and getting a little more knowledgeable on these things. And when I think about minarchists compared to like me, I don't think we need rulers as humans. I believe at some point in time in the future, we'll all be wise enough, just like slavery ended. And once you get people in the mindset that, we don't need slaves to do these things. And if you can move beyond having the state as the arbiter or the referee, if we could find different methodologies or something, people will move beyond that at some point in time. But in the current state that we are, is people are fully entrenched and believers that they need this thing. I lost my train of thought. What did you say just before I started rambling there?
I was saying that the real solution to this is to have a smaller government rather than.
Oh yeah. So with the minarchists, that's the thing. So yes, I don't believe we need a state, but for minarchists or even small C conservatives or just classical liberals who believe in kind of having some kind of restraint on government. To me, even though I don't agree with them on the whole thing, and I actually firmly believe that actually the mindset's what you need first. But I'm like, what I say is, listen, if you guys want to get to, let's say complete liberty is we're traveling down the highway and it's exit 10. If you guys only want to get to 9th exit, right? I'm more than happy to just keep traveling along that path with you guys, cruising along that, because at least I know we're headed towards the another thing is, at least we've turned this big giant. Right now, the status ship is traveling the other way. Right? We're literally barreling. Right. Yeah, we're barreling off the cliff. So I'm no longer interested in having these arguments with libertarians to see who can be more perfected in what libertarian utopia could be. I'm just concerned, can we at least get to the point where all of us are coming together enough that we can have these conversations and we can all bare minimally agree, let's just turn this damn status ship around and at least start heading that direction. Now, how far we're going to get, I don't know. We're humans. We're susceptible to fallibility. I get it. But can we at least try our best? And I think, like I say, no matter who you are, if you're an LGBTQ person and you're worried about the state coming after you, you should be really concerned about shrinking the size of the state right about now, right?
Sure.
So that's kind of.
But see, this is the moment that the Americans have managed to provide for themselves.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Who knows how this is going to turn out?
Mm-hmm.
But they have at least given themselves a chance.
Yeah.
And things right now appear to be moving in the other direction.
Yeah.
How far it will go, who knows? How successful it will be, I have great hopes, but we'll have to see. But they have turned onto a different page.
Yes, they have.
We have not done that yet in this country.
No. But Bruce, even when I was growing up, do you remember even when you're a younger man, did it seem like in terms of comparison to our American counterparts, it almost seemed, and it wasn't like 100%, but 5 years, like let's say when I was a kid, when breakdancing was big in like the US, right? It took a few years to come up to Ontario. Sure. And then when I moved back, or when I used to come back east in New Brunswick, it was like good 5 years later, even after it was big in Ontario. So it does kind of seem that the American culture, it definitely has a outside influence.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, for sure. But anyways, here's another question. Like I say, actually, this will be the last one because I already got you with the public ledger, the blockchain. But this is the thing. So here's my thing.
Okay.
Is there a hack? The question is there a hack that you can think of to speed things up here in the North? But here's what it is. So Bruce, so what I think about is when I started on this, I don't know what you want to call it, intellectual, philosophical, whatever journey, right? After this stuff, because like I say, after what happened to me, it's like, well, how do we get to the place in this country where I grew up thinking that we were free and all that, and laws were built on. So, and then I had this thing just come out of the blue and it just threw me for a loop. So then after that, I like literally started down the rabbit holes. But if I think about it today, and I'm very grateful and I'm humble enough to accept that people from all like political backgrounds, economic, philosophical, historians. I've gotten a lot of Christian oriented people, like religious people, psychologists like Jordan Peterson. I'm so grateful for the knowledge I've gained from all these people. But if I think of like, could I summarize in a short few sentences, the thing that really, really got me to where at least I needed to be, so at least everything else was open to me. And you'll hear this probably from a lot of people. Now, how I learned about even libertarianism was Ron Paul, who ran for the U.S. president in 2008, 2012. And of course, it was all after the financial crisis. And it was those, to some people, to the statists, to normal people, to Republicans and Democrats, or anyone watching it who are believers in the state, it was almost blasphemy, the things he was saying.
Yes.
But it was those profound truths that I had to, try to scramble through into my mind, figure out, wait a minute. And no matter how much I tried to debunk the things he was saying, it's like everything he said, everything he said was so consistent. It backed up everything that made sense to me. And so to me, and I get, there's a lot of these conversations. There's a lot of even policy stuff that's got to happen that'll take place that won't even ever be on a screen. Right. But for the people, the big people like yourself, or I'm not big in terms of popularity, or Jordan Peterson, is like I say, the hack for me is I needed all that other information as well. But the most important thing I needed, that hack that gave me that was the precipice to give me the ability to get that, is somebody had to tell me they had to tell me that more or less that all this stuff is not legitimate. And then I can work from there, because then at least my mind is open to experimenting and trying all these different things. But to me, the hack was, man, I got to tell you, Santa Claus isn't real. You know what I mean?
Right. 100%. Absolutely. Yeah. Hard truths are really necessary, and we have to give up some of our sacred cows, the ones we're carrying around in our heads. Yeah, because they're very difficult to get over. Because once you start to move those around, then you don't that place that you've lived all your life turns out to not exist. Yeah, and that's very hard for people. Very difficult. Right? Yes, but even some of the concepts that we carry around in our heads about, like, just for example, the idea of a social contract. Yeah. Okay. The social contract is bunk. There's no contract. Nobody ever asked me. I didn't agree to anything. I mean,
No.
it's a metaphor. It's a
Yeah.
metaphor among many metaphors.
Yeah. Yeah.
To legitimize and justify the situation that we have.
Yeah.
And the more we give up on those myths, and I mean myth in both sense, both myth as in falsehood, but myth as in sort of foundational story we tell ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
Give up the myths and try to see things as they actually are.
Yeah.
Then we can get beyond it and try and think.
We need a software update, I think is what you're saying, Bruce. We need
we really do. We do.
Yeah, I really think we do. And I think, like I say, I think that's something, and it's difficult for us and for all the folks that are watching there today. I know, and I find myself from time to time getting a little demoralized, especially now seeing the contrast between, like Bruce is alluding to, which way our country's for currently going versus our American counterparts. But we always got to keep in mind that, you know, even back during some of the great times, whether you're talking about the Enlightenment era or all, you can talk about these things in the present, talk about the past and the present, and make the timeline seem like it happened so quick, instantaneous, and spontaneous. But you got to remember, the people at the time, even in the times when these great changes happened, they probably didn't even have a clue at the time what they were doing, what the consequence, what the result of that, right? All of these great books by all these great authors that are basically, what's most shocking to me about reading a lot of these books and understand this is, shit, this has been known for forever, like hundreds of years. So we're not even reinventing the wheel. This kind of knowledge has actually been known for quite amount of time. And a lot of these people, when they wrote the books, they might have at the time, maybe 10 people, right, might have ever read them. But look at this hundreds of years later and how profound that kind of knowledge is, and the effect it has on my mind and the mind of people like yourself. So I have definite, I'm white-pilled, you would say. I mean, every once in a while, like I say, I get demoralized because of the individual events that take place, and that's going to happen, especially with social media, because the whole clicky thing, right? The more sensationalized, the worse it is, the more traction it gets. So of course it's always pumped up. But I just want to send the message to anyone there, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Bruce. And then of course I'll let you finish it up, and then we'll tie this bad boy up. Is that we really have the potential, but just like all the founding fathers or anyone in the past, even if you go all the way back to, you know, like the Greek philosophers and stuff, it's you have to be the statists, the collectivists, the people with tyrannical tendencies. They are relentless in their pursuit because that is their goal. Well, the only thing that can counter that is our diligence and being just as relentless in our pursuit to defend our freedoms and to give people the proper information that is the shield that they'll battle all that bullshit that they've been taught. Because like I said, I learned this stuff, or I was willing to learn this stuff because someone penetrated that barrier that I had, that was placed in my mind through indoctrination and horizontal reinforcement by the people in my immediate group and my peers and my family who were willing to, or maybe they weren't even knowledgeable enough to give me this. But we are living in this age of information. We are susceptible to having these conversations. Like I would have never thought in a million years I would ever be able to have a conversation with a fine upstanding gentleman like Bruce Pardy, you know, who is someone who's obviously had a massive outsized effect in a lot of people. You know, obviously had students over the course of your life, and I'm very glad to hear that you were one of the people to teach them, because that tells us at the very least that not everyone was being completely and hopefully, you know, dumbed down. Some people were getting and that's the reason there is the remnants, that those of us who are willing to pick up this mantle, this torch, and carry on this fight. And once again, it's not no fight. We're just using our words once again. But right. I think what we're doing now, and by making these connections, having these conversations, and even for some of the people, like I say, conservatives or such, I want for us to, like, there's no harsh feelings. I want to have good, honest, good faith arguments, but I want to be able to have actual dialogue with people that don't just agree with me. So I don't know if you could help me in that way, Bruce, you know what I mean? Or anyone that's watching this. Is I just think it's really important, because I think these kinds of conversations are what are so important, because it gives people different perspectives and something that they've never been privy to in the past. And it gives us the ability where we're leading by example. So I say we should show some unity, find some ways where we can come together, just like our American counterparts. And, you know damn well, everyone, all those 70 whatever million people that are supporting Trump, 100%, you can find lots of areas of disagreement.
Oh, yeah, no question. Sure. Yeah.
For sure. But they've agreed to them is their liberties, the future of their own lives, the lives of their kids, their offspring. The idea of their country is more important than these little stupid arguments that we can have bickering back and forth. So those conversations, and that's obviously is what got the American people. Well, their psychology kind of helps them too, their mindset. They're kind of predisposed to be that. But I think these kind of things that we're doing today, and not just talking in terms of the political realm, I see there's a lot of political talk out there, but I think we should, like I say, whether you bring an economist on, a libertarian, an anarchist, a constitutional lawyer, or a bring all these people from different areas and backgrounds, because I think that's what's most beneficial to people, because not everyone's going to be watching these shows that comes from academia. Some people are like myself, just a blue collar kind of guy that works in construction, and they want to be susceptible and privy to this kind of knowledge as well. So I think this is kind of important for us to like not silo ourselves, not just say, okay, I'm conservative, so I'm going to talk in my circle, live in these echo chambers. Let's reach across the divides, the political divides or the ideological divides. And as long as we're just talking, the worst thing can happen, if you don't like what I'm going to say, you can just, Bruce right now can just leave this stream, right? And so that's all we're doing is talking. But I think that's the area that we need to, I think, try to emulate our American counterparts. And in the interim, before anything else that is viable that might come to happen, is at least get us in the right mindset where we're having these conversations. What are your thoughts there, Bruce?
I can only say absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Right on. So like I say, if there's anything that you want to say to tie it up, or if there's any links or anything you want to share, I got you 2 hours. I won't take any more of your time, Bruce, but I really do genuinely appreciate you coming on and having this conversation with me today. I hope you enjoyed it in some way, and hopefully we'll have a conversation at some point in time going forward. And if there's anyone else that that wants to engage in these kind of discussions or dialogue, then let them out and tell them to reach out to me. Because, like I say, I'm kind of blind in terms of I don't perceive of people on the ideology. If you're willing to have a conversation with me, even if you're a socialist, let's talk about it, right? Because there are probably things that I could say that might help you in some way. And maybe you can tell me some things where I can kind of understand your perspective a little bit better rather than have preconceived notions. I think that's been the one thing in my life that's always helped me with other person, is just sit down and talk and get to know, because we're all humans at the end of the day, right? But yeah, is there anything that you wanted to say there, Bruce, or tie this thing up?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it. Right? Yeah, appreciate it. And I'll just let people know where to find me if they want to. On X, I'm at Pardy Bruce. I have a Substack, brucepardy.substack.com, and I run a think tank called Rights Probe, and you can find our materials at rightsprobe.org. So thank you for asking.
Right on. Well, I'll make sure, Bruce, to put those things in the description of this live stream so that they can find that and it'll be more readily available. And I'll continue to keep following you over there on X. And I definitely recommend folks who are on X to give Bruce a follow, because he's got not just a prominent voice himself, and he does put out some great content, but he's also got some great connections with other people that I'm sure that you'll be able to see. And when he's engaging and having dialogue with them, I've really enjoyed watching you and your interactions. So thank you once again, Bruce.
Thanks.
You have yourself a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll talk again soon, my friend.
Sounds great. Thanks, man.
Have a good one.